Hello, everybody. My name is Jacki Hill-Murphy, and it's a great pleasure to be interviewing Bjørn Heyardahl today. This is on behalf of the Bath Royal Literary and Scientific Institution and the Royal Geographical Society with the IBG, West of England and South Wales branch. We've organised this, but it's fantastic that we have so many people all over the world, and it's a wonderful honour. And let me introduce you to Bjørn. He's a fascinating man. He's a visionary environmentalist. He's a man from the mountains of South Africa who embraces his Norwegian Viking past and has travelled the world on environmental quests. And one of his most recent projects is heading the development of a community climate park around Ohio in the United States. He has done so much that that's just a potted version of it. I'm sure he's going to tell you a lot more. And so I'm going to introduce you. Here's Bjørn. Hi, Bjørn. And I'm going to go straight in with the first question, because it's this wonderful Viking ship, which is very interesting to us at the moment, because, of course, we're all fascinated by the film The Dig, which unearthed the most beautiful Viking ship in the 1930s. So let me ask you, first of all, what motivated you to recreate your own Viking ship, the Midgard Heron?
Thank you very much, Jacki. For me, the motivation was multifaceted. On the one hand, I've always just wanted a Viking ship. I have a very close affinity to my Viking genetics and genealogy going back to 812 in Norway, and I've always felt this incredible affinity for it. I love the aesthetics of it. I love the Norse mythology. I love the weaponry and everything there is about that era and what it represents in terms of courage and achievement. For me, that was one big motivator. It's always been there. But we wanted, because of my work in sustainability and regenerative systems and the work I do with the Earth Charter and the UNESCO chair in promoting global citizenship and ethics and compassion for the environment and the biosphere as a whole, we wanted for want of a less crude term, a PR opportunity, a way to draw attention to people in the exploration community and those average people at home who might be interested in following the adventure of something like a Viking expedition. And while we were on that expedition, we stopped at various nodes that were representative of regenerative activities and projects, some of our own and some of others. We chose an international crew, and we ran a leadership program with the crew on regeneration, on the one hand, all of the practical aspects of that, but on leadership and what it means to be a global citizen. So the crew were not just being trained in crewing a Viking ship, but in becoming global ambassadors for this impulse to live more intelligently and more aligned with our biosphere. So it was a complex set of motives, unapologetically personal on the one hand for me, just wanting a Viking ship before I die. And on the other hand, it served and has done very well as a tool to engage people in this dialogue. And we try to do that with the construction of the vessel as well. So the way we harvested the timber, the material selection, we try to follow very closely the way the Vikings would have done the carpentry and the maritime engineering that went into that vessel. And all of those things we documented for publication in articles and books, in seminars and workshops, something like this, and for a TV documentary eventually, so that this would give a voice to what we mean, to take it out of the conceptual and into reality of what it actually means to be a global citizen.
That's fascinating. So on that first short voyage you've already made, do you feel that you began to succeed in what you wanted to find out? Did you begin to, or was it just, early days for you in that first voyage?
Yes, look, the first voyage has produced a documentary, and it has produced this dialogue. It's got a lot of interest. It's produced a book, which I'll be publishing in the next few weeks. So a lot of it was accomplished. It certainly highlighted the challenges of creating global citizenship, on the complexities of getting a holistic or integral view across. People tend to look at things in smaller silos or compartments. So they would come into the expedition with a particular motivation, and that speaks for the crew and for those interested who observed it. But we've had enormous successes where virtually the entire documentary crew, who had a level of cynicism when they started just filming and documenting and scripting the documentary, and almost all of them have had a major shift, actually moved home onto a farm and started permaculture and planting gardens and being much more aware. So we felt that those that we have reached out to and touched really were moved to make a practical change in their life. So I'm quite happy with the results. It was extremely challenging on many levels. The crew selection was very challenging for me, and a lot of lessons learned there. So going forward, there's quite a change in the crew, about 50%. In terms of real alignment with the vision and ability to contribute to the overall intentions of the expedition, not just the story.
Gosh, well, it's fascinating. I was just as interested in going along the road on your transporter. It attracted so much attention, didn't it? Although I was watching it on public media, social media, when you were taking it on the road and everybody was stopping to look. It must have been quite a sight, really. It
was extraordinary. We built, for those of the listeners that don't know, we built this vessel up in the Magaliesberg Mountains. They're the oldest mountain range in the world, where we have a game farm in the cradle of humankind, which is not too far from Johannesburg in the northwest province. And we had to transport it from there down to Durban, where we launched the vessel for the first time on the ocean. And it was about an 800-kilometer route, which we did on a homemade trailer. And that was extraordinary. I mean, just getting it off the farm was enough of an issue. And then dodging, it was extraordinary. People making all over the place.
So beautifully made. It's stunning. Using your original tools, is that right?
Yes, where that was practical, where those things were available, we worked with axes and old saws and drills. And here and there, in the interest of time, we had to hurry things up towards the end of the expedition with some more modern equipment. But all of the material selection remained authentic, down to the sealants, using pine tar and linseed oils and those kind of things.
So how real is this Viking identity for you?
It's pretty real. I mean, I know I'm playing when I'm dressing up like a Viking, but Viking broadsword is my sport, and it's something I've just felt in my veins, more than a nationalistic Norwegian affiliation or identity, and more a connection with that phase in humanity where people were so literally immersed in their environment and intimate with it. And they did so little harm in harvesting their food. And people will be smiling a little bit when we talk about Vikings doing so little harm. But I'm talking about their production, not what they did to your ancestors in England for a few hundred years. But in their way of being in the world, that intimacy and the understanding of the oceans and the currents, the seasons, and creating these vessels, I have a real affinity for that, and almost kind of a genetic memory for these things. I love to row. It felt like just the most natural thing in the world to be on the deck of that vessel for me.
And then my next question is something that you raised, is that we think of the Vikings as being brutal, but that almost contradicts your intentions to build compassion for the environment and promote kind of peaceful relations across the globe, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That is, you raised with me before.
A lot of people have commented on that irony and said that it was not a good choice. I mean, we sailed under the UNESCO chair flag of the Earth Charter as well on that front. But for us, for me, the symbolism in that entire era and where it's appropriate for now is we've had almost an apologetic approach to sustainability, where the green movement, for want of a better term, has not quite had the backbone, not quite had the warrior aspect, and that could be represented in the strength of both Viking men and women. And I felt that was part of the dialogue that we needed to promote, that this is not a time for being a little wallflower or a flower child necessarily, or tree hugger. Yeah. That it's time to actually stand up and to meet the demands of what our biosphere and what other interests are demanding, because there's a very unapologetic attitude in big business and politics and so on. And we need an equal force to create some kind of balance in the world. And so the Viking warrior aspect, without all the blood and violence, of course, is what I'm promoting. Basically putting a real backbone into the green movement.
No, brilliant. I mean, I just go for it completely. So if we move on from your beautiful ship, and talk, do you mind if I just mention your grandfather for a minute? With Thor Heyardahl, did you know him very well? Did you have a great relationship with him? Were you very inspired by him?
Yes, I was inspired by him. I was born by a few days in South Africa, so contact with him was not regular. But I had a few extraordinary experiences with my grandfather from an early age. And he wasn't a truly iconic figure, as he was for many people, for me, but a very real one, because we were his grandchildren and heard the stories full hand and visited the spaces that he worked. In my adult life, I had an incredible experience with him in Tenerife, one of the final archaeological sites, because when he did the Ra expedition, there was obviously the question of, if people were leaving Northern Africa in those kind of crafts, would there not be signs in those islands that lie on the way where he crossed the Atlantic? And he found the step pyramids on the Canary Islands, and we had long discussions about the overlaps of our work, because he was obviously well known for both the Kon-Tiki and the Ra expedition, not as well known for the work that he did as a global citizen. And he was very active in the fields of pollution and global citizenship, trying to raise awareness, because he had an unusual access politically and with royalty around the globe, with the success of that, and how the Kon-Tiki expedition caught the imagination of the world and represented, just it having been done in 1947, just after the war, the world was really hungry for an adventure story that wasn't a bloody one, that wasn't to do with conquest and one country winning against another. The timing of it couldn't have been better from that point of view. And he used that access and that fame and influence very, very effectively in motivating political figures. The work he did with Mikhail Gorbachev, Ronald Reagan, Fidel Castro, and building relationships between those very different individuals at the time, starting Green Cross International with Mikhail Gorbachev when his political career came to an end. Those influences were all very inspirational for me.
Absolutely. I can't imagine a more interesting person as a grandfather, really. He certainly inspired me at a very young age. So, what do you think he would have said about Midgard? He would have loved it.
He did love it, and we discussed it at length in 2001 when I spent time with him on an archaeological site there, because these expeditions, this Viking expedition is the most recent of them, but it was from the mid-90s that I was doing various forms of exploration. The Midgard expedition's intention, as is stated in the slightly cheeky comment of the search for intelligent life on Earth, and the definition of that intelligence is biospherically aligned life that promotes abundant life here, life that does not unintelligently or unintentionally eat away at its own foundations. So that is the definition in terms of intelligence, because we have incredible intelligence that's applied not very intelligently through our choices of engineering and meeting our needs for food production and the way our homes are built and our cities are built, and particularly in the way we produce food. So looking for that intelligence and looking for people who are representative of that intelligence, not just romantically and regressing to people like the Khoisan or people living in the Amazon jungle in a very early expression of tribalism or hunter-gatherer, which seems like a very pure and is a very pure, almost indistinguishable life from all biospheric life, but looking for appropriate modern expressions, which are not a regression, but a transcendence of the limitations and the damage that can be caused with our technologies, with our whole new sphere, the sphere that we've brought into being. Who's leveraging that to bring us in alignment with our biosphere? How it cleans water, how it cleans air, how it maintains temperature. And so we've evolved as a group of global citizens, and in my organizations like Integral Climate Change Solutions and Midgard and the Climate Park projects and all of these, which we highlight through these expeditions. These are manifestations or modeling on small local scales, but all of them with the intention that they could be scaled up, that this is not some idealistic vision that's highly impractical. We grow food, we clean water, we process grey water, we build homes, and we build vessels that work. This vessel sailed, we survived, we sailed beautifully. And it's aesthetically pleasing. This vessel was representative of all these things. It was a beautiful technology. It learned from the past. It worked currently here. It was driven by manpower and by the movement of the wind in the sails. For me, it was an eloquent metaphor of how when we really think and when we really act with intelligence, we can produce beautiful things in the world that actually belong here, that enhance our whole spirit, They engage our intellect. They are meaningful in work and creativity. They create a dialogue. They have value. They can participate in the modern economy. So they're not exclusive of that. And it's these things which we're trying to bring to the fore, that if we have a complete rethink of our intelligence as a species and how we express that into the world, that we don't have this ill-considered human will that is forced on landscapes, causing these monstrous scars, and causing irreparable damage to our hydrosphere, to our pedosphere where we plant and grow our foods, and to our atmosphere and to our own bodies and minds. So that is the real impulse behind this, and it's not a humble intention. We intend to do it loudly and proudly, and again, the Viking theme of taking this vocally into the world is what our work is about.
And let's go back to when you actually launched it. You had to get a team together, didn't you? And I know how difficult that can be to put a good team together from when I've organized expeditions. So how did you go about choosing your crew?
That it was probably the most difficult part of the entire expedition, as most expeditions are. The climbing of Mount Everest, or the crossing of an ocean, or the building and sailing of a vessel seems to be an enormous task, but getting a group of 12 people to work harmoniously together to a joint vision, and one as complex as this. We weren't just trying to get around the Cape of Storms, which in maritime terms is no mean feat on a wooden historical vessel like this. But we needed to be representative of this global leadership. So there was a lot of exposure of the dialogue. And in my book, I record this in some detail, both our successes and some enormous failures on that level in terms of accomplishing from a people point of view. The selection, I deliberately, so it wasn't by mistake that I selected very autonomous, very high-powered, highly individuated explorers, largely through the Explorers Club of New York, and the networks that I've had there. I've been a member there since 2003. It kind of grew by just putting the word out in social media, and a few influential members of the Explorers Club putting the word out of this criteria. I then set a very rigorous physical criteria in terms of everybody's ability to row, to swim, to perform, to have strength and flexibility, and so on. And a memorandum of agreement was signed. What I didn't explore enough was the individual's ability to work with others, because so many of them, myself included, were highly individuated and had done many, like ocean rowing, months on end on their own, didn't mean that they were going to work very well as a team. And yes. The ego that's required, particularly male ego, we tried to get the group split exactly 50-50 women and men, and we were one short, weighted on the male side, as hard as I worked to get that balance. And we found that, yes, a lot, particularly the men, found it a little bit difficult being crew when they were used to leading their own expeditions. So there were some moments, not that it inhibited the actual physical expedition that much, and a lot of the issues manifested when we got ashore in Cape Town after the event. But there were lessons learned there, and I had to make some pretty hard calls during the expedition and afterwards on who would then go forward and be part of this crew for the next sections.
And when do you think that will happen? Oh, I know we're living in the time.
Yeah, it was supposed to happen last year. Yes. Yeah, we arrived in Cape Town in 2020 in mid-February, just before the COVID outbreak. So everything from a continuity point of view, and the next part of that expedition was to be from Norway. All the ports closed down. I had to take the boat out of the water. All the funding stopped from a support point of view on the vessel, and the entire thing came to a halt. But we did accomplish arguably the most challenging section of this entire expedition. We brought this magnificent vessel into being, handcrafted it, and we got it down onto the ocean, and we sailed it around the Cape of Storms. And any sailor will tell you that that's on their list as one of the things they really want to accomplish. So even what we've done so far, to answer your second question, I'm very, very pleased that we did get around and we got that done.
It was an amazing achievement. I'd love to have been there to see it, and I certainly would like to witness the second part of your trip when you go up near Norway. So you mentioned women. Why is it important for you to have women as part of your team?
Well, I've taken a lot of flack on the whole Viking theme over a lifetime, and I really wanted a balance. The women in exploration don't often get as much exposure as they should, and they make they performed extraordinarily well. My wife was one of the crew members, arguably one of the better rowers on that whole expedition. Kaz from London, amazing crew member and athlete, and Suzanne from Germany, who was our bosun, strong woman, extraordinarily capable. And I just, in the whole Viking spirit of having women fully participating in life, as the Vikings did, where women in those days owned property rights, they participated politically, they fought in the battles, they ran and owned, for large parts of those communities were run by women. And as we know from more recent archaeology, women had roles as jarls and led Viking expeditions themselves. And I wanted to honor that memory and do away with this silly notion. You see, the whole Viking thing has been robbed by kind of skinheads and bikers and these half-wits with Nazi tattoos and whatnot. There has been a kind of hijacking and all of the beautiful things that can come from that era have some been turned into a caricature of the opposite of what they could represent and mean for us. So I worked very hard on this expedition on having that balance there and highlighting the strength of it.
No, it's brilliant. And I noticed on the chat, there's somebody's already asking, are you looking for crew for your next trip? That's Helen Chaplin, if you can see the chat going down the side. And we've also got somebody saying, I'm a fellow at Explorers Club. Can you see that? Are there any other Explorers Club members here? I'm sure there are. It's almost time to hand over to everybody to ask you questions. So I just want to ask about this book because it sounds really exciting. When can we hope to read this book? When is it going to be? I
really was hoping to launch it tonight.
Oh, no.
I'm working on it both. I'm going to release it as an audio book. It was written in the style to be read as a story. And it is due to be released soon. So I'm going to upload it to Amazon within the next 3 weeks. And then it'll be available on a few platforms as an ebook and a print on demand. We're trying to discourage the use of paper where we can, but there will be a print on demand option for those who want a physical book in their hand, because obviously they don't. a nice thing to have.
People do like to buy books.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally
yes. And it'll come out as an audio book. So if anyone's interested in that, they can just look out on social media. They can follow me under Bjørn Heyardahl, or the Midgard Expedition website has contact details, all of that sort of thing to follow this. Just remember the spelling of Midgard is Midgard. And a search under that will lead you to one of the ways of getting hold of us to follow up on these things.
Brilliant. And I would have thought perfect listening on a long road.
Yes. Yes, and hopefully motivational listening.
That's right. So, although I've got loads of other questions, let's open it up now. There were some raised hands earlier. So, Helena, how do we do this?
Yes, I'm back. I'm back for the questions. Okay. So first of all, I believe Dave has their hand up. So I just asked them to unmute, and that should pop up on their screen. So Dave, they've got to actually press to. Oh, perfect! I can see they've unmuted. Hi, Dave. Do you want to ask your question?
I don't actually have a question. I don't know why you wanted me. Sorry.
Oh, your hand was raised, which is why we thought. That's absolutely fine, though. Lovely to see you. Hope you enjoyed the event.
Dave, the next time there's an opportunity.
All right, I'm going to mute you again, Dave. Thank you, though. Okay, so we have a David here in the chat who says, can you tell us more about your time at sea?
Yes, well, the seas are very different here. The first time we were out at sea, we tested the vessel first on inland water. So I had her certified, first of all, for still water, and we were on a lake called Harderbeespoort, and we sailed her in some fairly strong winds there and got a feel for her before we took her down to the coast. And that was just one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life. The first time you stand... When you sail a Viking ship of this size, you have you're holding the two sheets in your hand, and it's kind of like surfing, kite surfing, more so than sailing, and you're using the crew as human ballast. So as the crew moves around, because there's no keel to speak of, and the steering oar is very, very inefficient, you learn to tilt the boat with human ballast to move her, and you sail with the oars at the same time. So you'll have oarsmen and women putting oars in to steer or bring the nose around while the sail's up. So it's a very active deck, and a whole new way of sailing. And you build up this feeling for it, but the feeling of having that wooden deck moving quite literally under your feet, and the strakes are overlapping, so the waters and air is being sucked down and it lifts the vessel slightly. It's such a tactile intimacy with the water, and the sound of it is so beautiful, and it behaves quite differently. There's about 4% 4 to 6%, depending on the salinity, buoyancy wise, between the inland water and the ocean. So when we got on the ocean for the first time and we sailed out of the harbor of Durban and we sailed a little bit north, testing her, it was extraordinary experience, to answer your question on that level. She feels a bit different in the ocean, and the sailing was more complex. I mean, the rowing was more complex in the ocean. We felt incredibly safe on board, though. And when we went down to the Cape waters, when you go around Cape or Gullus, which is the southernmost point of Africa, and the two oceans are basically meeting there, you have an extraordinary life in the water. And it can be slightly unsettling. There's big swells that come in. You have up to 25-meter swells coming in, which we didn't have on this trip, thank goodness. But when we were sailing at night, and you kind of hear the wave coming in and the lift of this vessel. The first few times that could feel a little bit scary, but we got to trust how well this vessel is designed.
Yeah.
So she felt beautiful day and night on the water. She didn't take much water on board, even in a bit of surf and quite big swell. When we went into Gordon's Bay, finally, between Hermanus, on the last leg, we had our biggest winds, sort of 25 knots, and she performed absolutely beautifully. Because she's so quiet, we had giant stingrays and we had seagulls and all manner of seabird and aquatic life around us. I've tried to detail this in the book, but it's a poetic, beautiful, and for me it was an extraordinarily safe feeling, being this boat belongs in the water and you feel like that. Having said that, I had one of the worst days of seasickness for 16 hours straight that I've ever had in my life.
Oh, nasty. Oh, that's horrible.
My goodness, it was.
There's nothing worse, is there?
Punishing. And I've had such bad weather before on dhows in Mozambique, in heavy currents and winds, and been absolutely fine. But one of the days down in Cape Town, I was near death.
Oh, that's nothing.
So it wasn't all fun and games, but it was beautiful. And I
can imagine it must be. Can I skim through some of these questions that are coming in, kind of like the short answers? Would that be all right? We go from the last one. Could you use wooden bolts instead of metal for your boat?
No, we use wooden pegs and dowels to join some of the interior. So for the ribs, which are put into the hull to firm it up at the end. But the clinker bolts are tried and tested for 1,000 years or more, as a way of holding that entire boat together and still leaving some flexibility in it.
Okay.
So to have dowels when your planks are quite thin, the joints are then going to be more vulnerable than clinking. For those of you who didn't, I hope everybody did watch the clinking on the bolt, but you literally bang the head out flat on two washers basically on either side of that boat, and you clink the entire vessel together, which creates an enormous strength that allows it to move. And we cork between, so in the gaps are filled with hemp and pine tar, and there is a flexibility which you feel in that vessel. She takes a wave right on the nose, and there's a movement as you go through, and the clinker bolts allow for that. Most people's advice is not to dowel it at all.
Okay, so quick, this is a yes or no. Did you see any great white sharks?
No, most of the great white sharks have been chased. I thought I saw an orca fin come up just outside Gordon's Bay on our last day, and the orca have moved into the Cape Town area, and they've killed or frightened off a lot of the great white sharks in that area. So no, we didn't. Okay,
and here's another very interesting question. I wonder if this is from Stephen Copestake. I wonder if a historically accurate Viking boat could circumnavigate the globe just to see if they could have done it.
I'm quite sure you could. You would have to pick your battles and your weather windows very, very carefully. To my knowledge, nobody has done that yet in a Viking ship. I stand open to correction. Our intentions is to do pretty much of that over the next few years. But for right now, we're happy with where we're at, and following the Viking routes out of Norway through Scotland, across to Portugal, through the Mediterranean, and eventually into the Black Sea.
That would be ambitious to go around the world, wouldn't it? Yeah, that sounds very ambitious to me. We've got another question here. Did you eat and sleep on the boat? I think I was asking you this, wasn't it? Did you eat and sleep on the boat, or did you stay overnight on land? I think you answered that, but presumably
yes, we did both. So we did eat and sleep on the vessel. We sailed through the night, but wherever possible, we went on land for the evening. So we tried to make our sailing sessions were sometimes 16 or 20 hours. Because there was no landing points. The Cape Coast is notoriously dangerous and very rocky. Yeah. So we had to make it through certain sections to get into a bay where we could moor for the night. And wherever we could, we did that.
So you were actually creating quite a pure experience, Viking experience. This is Liz Gray who was asking this question. She wanted to know how pure an experience it was, but it sounds like it was to you.
Yes, we had a lot of those elements. You know, we even, for our bedding, we had sheep skins, which everybody was cursing me for having to carry around with us, and they found them extraordinarily comfortable as seating against the side and something you could sleep on. Yeah. So we really tried to do it authentically as we can. But when, you know, to do it as the Vikings did in the North Sea, and take no provisions and catch only fish and all of that sort of thing, it wasn't quite as raw as that.
No. I think there are some other people, their hands raised. Is that right, Helena?
Yeah, I'll just have a look now. It's P. Gibbs. Just going to allow to talk.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Hi, Bjørn. Congratulations on a fantastic venture. This has been absolutely fascinating. I'm a weather forecaster by profession. I'm sure your Viking ancestors had some pretty good techniques for predicting the weather even back then. But did you use those, or did you take advantage of modern technology on this trip?
We did a combination. We had a question like this before with the panelists. So to qualify, I had this Viking ship was certified so that we wouldn't have to have a support vessel at any stage. We wanted it to be autonomous, so it was certified as a sailing vessel for open water with no restrictions. So it had all the safety equipment on board, but it was below deck and so on. And we did also, we checked the weather. We relied heavily on not just technical predictions of the weather or instrumentation, but the local fishermen, local sailors. Our captain that I appointed for the vessel has sailed that particular coast many, many times. So yes, a lot of it was a combination of intuitive sailing and knowledge of those weather systems. In the Cape, you generally get 3 days of the wind blowing south and then 3 days of it blowing north or onshore. So we had to work within those known rhythms, but we had the instrumentation as well. We had so we erred on the side of caution with that kind of thing. We sailed very close, about 3.5 kilometers offshore. We hugged the coast for most of that because the swell's far out and the weather can shift in that South Atlantic so quickly. It's quite scary.
That's brilliant. Thank you. It's good to know where local knowledge played such a big part.
To me, it was the most critical part of, and the thing we paid most attention to.
Thanks. Great answer. Who's the other person, Helena?
I think it was just P. Gibbs. So I'm just going to lower their hand and then we can go back to the questions in the chat.
Okay. we've got Jason Shee saying, whenever I see Viking longships, I always believe that it looks like waves would pour over from the sides. Does this happen?
Yes, no, it doesn't happen. It could happen, of course, but because you responding and to every movement, you're not just plowing through. You're preparing. We would move. So if you see a swell or a wave coming from the side, the crew moves to the other side of the boat, lifts it, and as it goes under, shifts back to the middle. And we got to work with it like that. So we took very, very little water over the side, and not one single full wave at all.
Wow, really? Do any flying fish land in your...
No, there aren't flying. That's more in the Pacific Ocean. Okay. I know my grandfather was swatting them with frying pans on the Kon-Tiki, but we didn't have flying fish.
We got a question here from Guy W. saying, what were the crew afraid of while sailing apart from waves and orcas? And your seasickness, obviously. Can you see that? The crew.
What were the crew afraid of while sailing apart from waves and orcas? I think, there was a fair amount of fear about the actual seas themselves, and that how this boat would perform. And from the most unlikely of sources, I found quite a few of the most hardy of expeditionists were the most skittish and really fearful on this particular vessel for one reason or another. I see my wife responding to some of the participants there that we had.
Is that Alison?
That's Alison, yes.
Okay.
She's down in the Eastern Cape at the moment. And she's saying we relied on the NSIR. We have the National Sea Rescue Institute for the sections near Cape or Gullus, sailed out with, came out with us on their boat and then left us. And they were on call to rescue us. They were very nervous about our crossing.
Really?
And quite a bit of negotiation with them because the weather was particularly bad when we were down there. We had some big seas, that very experienced motorboat launches down there that are seasoned fishermen, commercial fishermen, weren't going out on the day we were supposed to launch. So we held back and we took advice from them. And thank goodness we didn't need to call upon them, but they were very supportive and also very helpful with their advice from a safety sailing point of view.
Gosh, and then Mimi is asking you, did you ride is that the Gullus current, or were you too close to the shore? I'm
sorry, I missed you for a second.
This question, can you see the question from Mimi? Did you ride is that a Gullus current that she's asking you there? AGULHAS.
Yes, there's two major currents that come down, the Gullus and Benguera. And there's quite a few. So the main, we didn't go out deep into the deep currents. We stuck right on the, so we were more sailing on the wind inshore. All the advice from local sailors was to hug the coastline and not go much beyond 3.5 kilometers out to sea, and rather take the danger of being washed on shore than getting out into the enormous swells that you can have deeper offshore.
So presumably you had some kind of modern technology with you to alert the emergency services, which the Vikings would not have had.
No, they would have been pretty much alone, but they wouldn't have been sailing alone in a single vessel either. So they would have had multiple vessels all in sight of one another to support one another. So when you're in a singular vessel, often you think of that there was one guy setting out with his group of people in a single vessel. But I mean, sometimes there were up to 100 vessels sailing together Bjørn Heyardahl was sailing 40 vessels into the Mediterranean at one time. So it was a different kind of support structure that was available there.
And not a lifebelt in sight.
Yeah.
No. Some really nice questions coming in here. We've still got this question about team. People are very interested in the team. Are there any modern explorers around with whom you would like to team up with future expeditions?
We are looking at the moment at them, and we're looking very strongly at some Norwegian sailors out of Tønsberg that are very experienced on the North Sea. Because of that, we've come to realize how critical the specific knowledge is. But yes, once the funding's in place and the next and the timelines are there, then we will be looking at CVs again and scrutinizing them quite heavily. But yes, we're looking, and Suzanne has recommended a few individuals, our bosun. I see this other question come up here. Do you know where we can see the full documentary? The full documentary hasn't been put together yet. So we've got that taster documentary, and we've got hundreds of hours of footage, and we are busy waking. Thank you kindly, sir. Said a very kind gentleman bring me a whiskey. So yeah, cheers. It is late enough evening now to have a little.
Cheers. So I think that there's somebody has a raised hand.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna ask them. We've got Bob. You've been asked to unmute. Can you unmute yourself? Maybe give it a few seconds. Okay, well, Bob can unmute whenever they'd like. So maybe we just wait for them to do that.
Okay. We're getting some really nice things here, Bjørn. We got thanks for a splendid adventure from Jane. And who are your other inspiration explorers? From Rachel, I hope your granddad's one.
Yes.
Number one, yeah. Number one.
I know it's an overstated one, but Shackleton certainly, for me, has always been, just as a leader who got the impossible done without the loss of a crew member, ability to manage a crew of that size under that kind of strain,
yes.
For me was just probably the most extraordinary story I've ever heard, and one of the most inspirational people. My grandfather, obviously, yes, was a huge inspiration.
What about Ran Fiennes? Is he one of your heroes?
Yes, I do. I mean, he's done some extraordinary
hasn't he?
Acts all round, and I also love the mountains. I've never been one for climbing. Sort of putting a flag on top of a mountain kind of thing. But I have enormous respect for.
Absolutely. So,
yeah.
Meme is asking, were you inspired by the Polynesians?
We actually considered at one stage having an outrigger option for the Viking vessel, and I still have this fantasy of building the first Viking catamaran, a 2-hold Viking ship, but it's just a pipe dream at the moment. But yes, the Polynesians were extraordinary at sailing. My grandfather learned a lot from them, and we studied the outrigger possibilities quite a lot when we were looking at variations for depending what water we were sailing in to bring more stability to the vessel.
Excellent. And Dick is asking, what do South Africans make of your Viking expedition?
Yeah, South Africans were very inspired. You know, South Africa has bred a unique population of people. So we have a very resilient, tough, adaptable population down here with what's happened in South Africa over millennia. And people of all races here have really experienced life up front and personal on many levels. So they relate to the courage of the story and to the iconography of the Vikings. We've had a lot of support out of South Africa and a lot of fascination.
Yes, well, I should think so. I think I missed this question. It's some time ago. It said, Bjørn, how do you see this project moving forward in the light of our present situation? Did we cover that, you think? Because, of course, you know, you said...
I don't know. The real answer to that is we don't know, and I don't know what we're going to be allowed, what's going to be reasonable. Also, the funding environment has changed so substantially. But we're looking at creative ways of raising that and through the publication of the books and articles and documentaries and so on. So I sincerely hope that we're going to find a reasonable way to deal with these health issues that are around the globe, and that we'll be able to return to this kind of healthy adventure soon.
Absolutely. People are saying that it's been very interesting, that it's fascinating, your talk. We are open for more questions. If there's anybody out there, there's still quite a lot of people online. So any more questions? Anyone like to raise a hand and come in and talk to us? Oh, Dick's there. Yeah, hi, Dick.
So, Bjørn, it would be great to see the Midgard Viking ship sail up the Potomac or into St. Petersburg or up the Thames into London by the Houses of Parliament and really sock it to them.
You never know, that might well happen. And let me share an image then. We said we would do this. Of what that profile might look like if it was sailing. This particular shot, can everyone see that? Oh, I've got to press this share screen thing, don't I? Or is it sharing?
Yeah, so you just got to go to the bottom, press the green share screen, and then it should ask you which screen you want to share.
Okay, just give me a second because sorry, we rehearsed this, but my forte is not.
Don't worry. I don't think any of our fortes are really Zoom.
Okay, have I shared screen? Does it show that I've done that?
Yes.
Not yet, no. If you go just down to the bottom of the screen and press that green button that says share screen.
Now I've made you all disappear. Oh, there you are. Okay, I've pressed share screen, and then I go to...
So, and then on Zoom, it will ask you which screen.
Yes, it's saying that, but it's blocking my view of the screen. There we go. Okay, are you seeing that?
Still not, unfortunately.
Oh. Well, that's a pity. Sorry, people.
Yeah, Bjørn had some amazing photos earlier than when we were practicing.
Yes, and I don't know what's gone wrong because I'm back on here now on the little green arrow and I can see you, Helena.
Mm-hmm.
And I press share screen. Now.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah. So this shot is this is going to be the cover of my book. And this is a shot at the moment we were rounding Cape Gullus. So this is 3.5 kilometers. The mist cleared and the wind dropped, and we got this shot off the vessel that was nearby us, and they returned to Strathspey by. But if we were on the Thames, it would look something like that coming past.
Wow.
Like that if it was a little closer up.
Bjørn, you've got a great suggestion from Liz Gray. I wonder if Liz could unmute herself and ask you the question herself.
Okay, Liz.
Yeah, hi. Hope you can hear me. I was just going to rather selfishly ask if you could bring your boat to the River Avon, and I'll follow you up in my single scull. You might have to take the sail down, though. You'd struggle to get underneath our Georgian bridges.
Yes, that would be wonderful, and we're open to all those suggestions. And anyone with a little extra funding, we could pretty much sail her anyway. Are you able to see the screen at the moment?
No.
Oh, not again. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Liz? Now, you should see the screen. There.
Yes.
Okay, this was off Cape Town as well. Can you see the dragon's head?
Yeah.
What it might feel like to be standing behind that or watching that arrive in your river. But we to just talk to your question a little bit, is we designed the mast so that it's chocked in, but it can pivot at the bottom. So if we come to a bridge sailing up a river or trees, we can actually lie the mast down flat onto the tail of the dragon, row it underneath and pull it back up again, and then raise the sail. So river sailing is something we designed for.
Well, Bjørn, whenever I'm in my single scull, I imagine that that's the view I have behind me as I'm going down the river.
Yes. Yeah, it's beautiful. Just looking at it now again, it seems like a dream, you know. It's been months since I was on deck, and I'm longing to go back and get on her again.
Wow.
Thank you.
I think someone's just asked you how big the crew was.
12.
Oh, that's quite a lot of people. Oh, what a lovely picture. 12.
Do you see the giant stingray?
Yes. Wow.
In the water over here, it came up. We hand fed that stingray with yellowtail that was caught by a fisherman. This is at Strathspey down in Cape Town. This is a shot as we were exiting, the first time we went out to the ocean, and we were exiting the harbour of Durban. You can see the buildings in the background. It's always such an ironic situation. And there was a very happy moment for me and my wife, Alison, off the Durban skyline is behind us there. But after the year, really hard effort, this was an extraordinary moment for the two of us, having accomplished that thus far.
Amazing. What a lovely picture. Any more? I'm loving these pictures.
This is the first time we were putting the boat into the water. That's myself and the carpenter on the left-hand side, Andre, and we were launching off the dolly the boat onto Durban Harbour for the first time at Point. For those of you sailors who have been into South Africa, the famous Point Yacht Club is where we camped while we did the first sea trials down there. And that was after very little sleep the night before. This is a scene, we did educationals on the expedition where we took the whole crew to our climate parks, taught them the planting systems, the integrated approach to biodiversity. We took them into the game parks. This is a shot, so I've got it sort of on random select at the moment, but this was an inland water trial. Where we were launching her for the first time onto the water at all. This is the young lady I was talking about, Suzanne from Germany. who is a shaman, Norse trained shaman, and she ran the initiation processes. We had a whole initiation process for the crew with rune stones and fireside events and all sorts of activities on the first 2 evenings before we took the boat down, and she led those. This is some Viking furniture where we sat in Viking council. You can see the drinking horns on the table there, and these are the sheepskins that we took onto the vessel as well, which proved very, very handy. And that's the sign at the Viking boatyard, which very cheekily says Heyardahl boatyard, hand building Viking ships since 793.
Yeah. Right.
This is an example of the carving and progress of the entire vessel. All of the vessel is carved in Viking and Norse mythology of different kinds along the gun rails. And we even carved in my grandfather's, as an honor to him, the Kon-Tiki head is also carved into the side. And there's the Viking compass, which is in the middle of the deck. There's my wife, Alison, during the ceremonies with... this is shots of the boatyard itself when we were beginning the build and just putting it together. And this is us in Umfolozi Game Park on the north coast of KwaZulu-Natal, doing environmental immersions and teaching the crew about biodiversity and the infinite relations between humans and their environment, to impress upon them the importance of this global citizenship. The Viking shield. Yeah, I think those give you a little sampling. This is in Norway. We spent quite a bit of time in Tunsberg, the oldest Viking town in Norway. And there's me with 2 fellow Norwegians on deck of one of the Viking ships there. In the background is the Saga Oseberg. You'll see it in front of that red brick building. For those of you who know anything about the archaeology in Norway, the Saga Oseberg is a very famous vessel that was found in near Tunsberg, and they built a replica of that, which we sailed to learn how. There's me on deck of the Saga Oseberg, sailing in the Oslo fjord as part of our education and raising the sail. So we learned all our basic skills from the Norwegians there. And while I was there, I was stayed at, we've got a flat on the Kon-Tiki Museum in Oslo, where my grandfather's 2 vessels, both the Ra and the Kon-Tiki raft, are housed. For those of you interested in that part of the history. These are just scenes from around the boat build in our boat yard. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Coming through, actually, Bjørn. If we go back to the screen,
yeah.
How do we do that, Helena?
Where are we going?
Bjørn will have to stop screen sharing if we want to go, or if you want to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, let me do that. How do I? Oh, goodness.
Okay. That's all right. If you just press the X, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. Yes. Perhaps we can whiz through some of these questions that came through while you were talking.
I'm going to have to plug in my power on my laptop while you do ask the questions. I'll be in here.
That's fine. Mimi wants you to go to the Brazos River in Texas with the ship.
Yes, she must talk to Trammell Crow at EarthX and tell him we did have some idea of doing a climate park on the Mississippi near New Orleans, and then there was some talk of having the vessel go down to and sail up the Mississippi. So that's not too outrageous an idea.
Okay.
Somewhere in her neck of the woods.
Hear me, Bjørn. Jocelyn Murgatroyd wants to know if your grandfather's voyages are online somewhere for her to view.
Yes, she just does a search under the Kon-Tiki Expedition or goes onto the Kon-Tiki Museum website, all of the links are available there. And there was a modern movie made on the Kon-Tiki Expedition, which was particularly well done. So you can view the old one, the one that won an Oscar in the 1950s, which was a very simple coverage. Excuse me.
Whiskey helped that, didn't it?
I think so. Sorry about that.
Okay. Stephen Kopstek says, do you think in the future sea level rise will make sailing more exciting when people can take shortcuts by, say, sailing straight across France? That's a bit radical. I don't think I'll be around for that.
Hopefully not, yeah.
When was the boat built? You've answered that, haven't you? That was in northern South Africa, is that right?
It was in the northwest province of South Africa, yes, not too far from Johannesburg in the cradle of mankind.
Oh, brilliant. I'd love to go there. How did you manage cooking on board, asks Rachel.
We pre-cooked, so we didn't do any fire cooking on board, but there are various ways of doing that. You know, we learned from sailing the dhows up the east coast of Africa. Sandboxes are sometimes used, so you can actually have coals and fire on the boat inside a sandbox and cook that way. But we pre-cooked all the food on board.
No coffee or anything like that.
Sorry?
You couldn't boil water for any coffee or tea then?
Yes, we had small gas burners and that for that sort of thing, so we could do the coffee and tea. Yeah.
That's okay. Did you get your craftsmen locally in South Africa, or did they come from Norway, Denmark, asks Liz?
The craftsmen were both South African and Zimbabwean, but under some tutorage from the Norwegian, the very experienced boat builders in Tunsberg.
Okay. And here's an interesting question. Were your parents explorers?
No. They had quite adventurous lives. My dad spent quite a bit of time in Kenya, and my mother, Denise, and him lived in Rhodesia back in the day, Zimbabwe now, and lived in quite a wild circumstances and that sort of thing. But neither of them have been directly involved in exploration of this kind.
Right. And then Dave wants to know if there are any animals on board. Your other one.
There was a dove on board, which you'll read about, one of the more humorous stories in the book. We had someone bring a pigeon on board that was wearing underwear, if you could believe it. But you have to read the book to get the full humor of that experience.
Oh, I'm definitely going to read it. And Alison has chipped in here and said we had lots of boiled eggs. And what is bore?
Burri. It's a shortened term for boerewors. It's a farmer's kind of sausage, but it's made in one long string. It's a South African traditional meal, so we pre-cooked meters of that, and people loved it in the beginning, but we're pretty tired of it by the end. So yes, boiled eggs and boerewors became
a brilliant comment from P. Gibbs. Will you have an opportunity to take your sustainability message to COP26 in Glasgow later this year?
Yes, we will, via both the work that I do with it for South Africa and the Middle East, and also I'm on the board of directors of Global Green USA, so we're represented there on both those fronts.
Well, that seems to be, from what I can quick squiz through there. That seems to be all the questions, and it's actually 2 minutes to 9, so it seems like perfect timing. And somebody's waving their hand. It's Stick again. Yes.
Bjørn, when you come to Bristol and Bath and sail the Midgard up the River Avon, we're looking forward to you lecturing in Bristol, lecturing at Bath Royal Literary and Scientific Institution, and then we'll go and have one hell of a drinking session in a small pub that I know very well in my village.
I certainly look forward to that, and I'll bring my drinking horn with me.
Oh, that sounds better. Well, on behalf of everybody, the Bath Royal Literary and Scientific Institution and Royal Geographical Society, I cannot thank you enough. It's been so interesting, and let's hope you'll come back on again after your next leg of your voyage, or when you've something, because it's been fascinating. So thank you so much. And on behalf of everybody, has everybody else had their say? Yes? Dick, Helena, everybody else?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to echo what Jacki's just said. Thank you, Jacki, for bringing the speaker to us, and Dick for coordinating as well. And Bjørn, that was such a wonderful talk and really brightened my evening. So on behalf of the society, thank you all for giving such an amazing talk. And I'm sure everyone watching is giving a nice virtual clap or an invisible clap. So thank you so much.
Okay. Just thank you for the opportunity to share this message, because this is the reason that we got involved in it in the first place. And please do follow, and we really appreciate some feedback, through Integral Climate Change Solutions website, through Viaport website. If you search my name under Climate Parks for ease of reference. Try and follow us on social media. Look up Bjørn Heyardahl on Facebook and the Midgard Expedition. It's just lovely to get a show of support. And there you will get regular updates and see where we are at and where we will be. If obviously we're always looking for support of one kind or another for the work that we do. So if you feel you can contribute in kind or are part of a fundraising exercise that might help us get this message out better, or support one of the legs in the future, we would be very, very grateful for any of that kind of support. But we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Bjørn. Thank you.